Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths by Jennifer Zeng. Today I'll talk about what messages I see behind the speeches of US President Trump and the CCP's head Xi Jinping at the recent United Nations General Assembly in New York. What I think will happen if Taiwan's bid to rejoin the UN is vetoed by the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Why I use the fallen UN and the rising New World Order as the title for this show. I will also share an exclusive personal experience of covering an event inside the UN's headquarters in New York as a journalist. And I hope that you can tell me what you think after listening to my true story. I'm not sure how many of you have watched President Trump's speech at the UN. Anyway, in the very first paragraph, or only 19 seconds into his speech, he mentioned China right away.
75 years after the end of World War II and the founding of the United Nations, we are once again engaged in a great global struggle. We have waged a fierce battle against the invisible enemy, the China virus, which has claimed countless lives in 188 countries.
Altogether, he mentioned China or Chinese government 12 times in his 7-minute speech. And the most important message is this.
As we pursue this bright future, we must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China. In the earliest days of the virus, China locked down travel domestically while allowing flights to leave China and infect the world. China condemned my travel ban on their country, even as they canceled domestic flights and locked citizens in their homes. The Chinese government and the World Health Organization, which is virtually controlled by China, falsely declared that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Later, they falsely said people without symptoms would not spread the disease. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has killed nearly 1 million people worldwide and about 200,000 in the US, and many countries suffered tremendous economic losses because of the lockdowns. So how much should the world ask for compensation from the CCP? And how can the US hold the CCP accountable? For the economic losses, some said that the victimized countries should ask for compensation of at least 1 year's GDP. For human life, I think none of us is capable of giving a price to it. So no one knows how the US will hold the CCP accountable either. But one thing is critical clear, that is, since Secretary of State Mike Pompeo declared that the division between the US and the CCP is between freedom and tyranny, and since the US government started to separate China, Chinese people, and the CCP, America has made up its mind to not only decouple with the CCP, but to not to recognize its legitimacy and even to destroy it completely. We all know that the US destroyed the Soviet Union through the Cold War after declaring the Soviet Union as the evil empire, and that the conflict between the US and the Soviet Union was a battle between good and evil. Not long ago, US Senator Ted Cruz declared that the CCP is the new evil empire. In many senses, we can say that an undeclared, unconventional war has already started between the US and the CCP. On the CCP side, Unrestricted Warfare has long since started against the US and the free world, only the world didn't realize it. On the US side, a national all-out battle to fight back against the CCP's unrestricted warfare has just started very recently, perhaps after the pandemic. In this sense, we can say that the US was very slow in realizing the danger and then thinking about how to fight back. The good thing is, as the #1 democracy in the world, if it has set the course, it will not stop until it reaches its goal. Xi Jinping also made a speech at the UN Assembly. As usual, CCP officials' speeches are full of lies, beautiful big words, and a lot of disgusting nonsense, and are not worth mentioning. However, many Chinese netizens found two things very funny in Xi Jinping's speech. One was this part in his speech.
Dear colleagues, 75 years ago, the people of the world fought for their lives to win the world anti-fascist war.
People asked him, who is the China you are talking about? Your CCP's regime was only founded 71 years ago. So 75 years ago, that China you mentioned was ruled by the Kuomintang or Nationalist Party, which is in Taiwan now. Are you recognizing that Kuomintang's China is the real China and an independent country? Are you recognizing that the Republic of China is the one that had made historic contributions? Another funny part of Xi Jinping's speech was when he cried out that relations between countries and coordination of their interests must only be based on rules and institutions, and they must not be lorded over by those who wave a strong fist at others. That is the CCP's mouthpiece Globe Times translation. If I am to translate it, I will put it this way according to Xi Jinping's original Chinese words. Relations and interests among countries can only be coordinated with systems and rules and not by the fists of the more powerful. Or it will not do to have whoever has the bigger fist have the final say. Why people find this extremely funny and ridiculous? Because that is exactly what the CCP has been doing in the world. Because it thinks it has a bigger fist than many smaller countries, it has been bullying around all the time in the world. Now, as soon as the US stood up against its bullying ways and showed a little bit of its national power, the CCP immediately felt the pressure and started to cry that whoever has the bigger fist has the final say is not the way to handle relations among countries. Xi Jinping also mentioned the so-called multinationalism a lot in his speech.
China will stay committed to practicing multilateralism and actively take a part in the reform and development of the global governance system.
This, according to me, reflects his deep fear that the CCP will be excluded from a new world order because the world has grown tired of being taken unfair advantage of by the CCP. Although Xi Jinping has been promoting the so-called internal circulation of its economy inside China, and the CCP officials are boasting that Chinese people can survive for 1 year by only eating grass. The CCP knows very well that without the outside world, the CCP's economy cannot survive on internal circulation or eating grass. Now, let's move to Taiwan's bid to rejoin the UN. We discussed this issue briefly in our last show, Taking Back Mainland China Easier Than Seeking Taiwan Independence. We mentioned that 3 countries, including the US, Australia, and Swaziland, has shown their support for Taiwan. However, we should not forget that the CCP's China has taken over the Republic of China's seat in the UN and has become one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. So it has the power to veto many things in the UN, including Taiwan's UN membership. What will happen if the CCP does veto Taiwan's bid? According to Chinese commentator Wen Zhao, the US may consider withdrawing from the UN, like it has withdrawn from some other international organizations or treaties. The UN has become so corrupt that it is meaningless to maintain it. Talking about the UN's corruption, I do have an exclusive and personal experience to share. Back in 2012, I was a reporter for the Chinese division of Newtown Dynasty Television, or NTD-TV, in New York. As NTD-TV is one of the very few overseas Chinese language media outlets that remain independent of the CCP, and as it often covers CCP's human rights abuses and other atrocities, the CCP hates it very much. As a result, NTD has never been granted permanent media accreditation by the UN to cover events happening inside its headquarters in New York. Reporters have to apply for a temporary pass to cover individual events every single time and often get rejected. So in 2012, before the International Women's Day, I applied for a one-day pass to cover a women's forum inside the UN building. I was eventually given a pass, but on the condition that one of the UN media officials needs to accompany me at all times. So, for the whole time I was there, a male official shamelessly followed me everywhere I went. When I interviewed people, he stuck his head so close to me that I could feel the heat of his breath on my neck and ear. He stayed so close to make sure that he could listen clearly to every word I said to my interviewees. Furthermore, 2 very high-profile officials, one from the US, one from Australia, ended up not receiving my interview after agreeing to it. The Australian official told me in embarrassment that because of the pressure he just received from the CCP, he had to decline my interview request. And the US official was virtually physically dragged away from my microphone by her assistant after I had already started to ask her questions. I felt so insulted. For a short moment, I felt like I was in a Chinese labor camp again. You know, between 1999 to 2001, I was arrested 4 times and imprisoned for 1 year in Beijing female forced labor camp for practicing Falun Gong, a meditation and spiritual improvement practice. Inside the labor camp, every Falun Gong practitioner was surrounded and monitored by criminals all the time. These people were given a nickname, Bao Jia. Bao means to surround, to besiege. Jia means to clip, to sandwich, or to put in the middle. So one Falun Gong practitioner was surrounded by several Bao Jia at all times. Even when we used the restroom, no privacy, no human dignity at all. The CCP did this to us to make sure that we could not talk to fellow Falun Gong practitioners. Even eye contact was not allowed. The CCP wanted to break our will by subjecting us to complete surveillance and isolation, and I hardly survived all the torture. By the way, if you'd like to know more of my story, please search for my memoir, Witnessing History, One Woman's Fight for Freedom and Falun Gong, or the documentary Free China, The Courage to Believe. Now let's go back to the UN building. Who would have expected that I would be enjoying the privilege of having a UN official act as my baojia inside the UN building and on American soil? And he was very loyal to his mission. He accompanied me all the whole time until I finished all my interviews, and then he saw me out of the building. But before he let me go, he added another request, asking me to send a link to the report that I was going to do so that he could check it. I felt so insulted again, but I did send him a link to the report I did on the following day because, for one, I wanted to show him that as an NTD TV reporter, I was fully capable of covering a normal event like any other normal reporter. NTD TV reporters were not crazy people like what the CCP had told them. The second reason was I also had fear. I didn't want to make things worse for NTD TV by refusing his request. He had the power to decline our media pass applications, right? So that's my true story of working with the United Nations Media Office. For such a small matter of me covering a small non-governmental forum, the CCP still made such a big fuss. So for other big issues such as Taiwan's rejoining the UN, what kind of resources will the CCP put into stopping them? Why has the UN done so little or nothing about the CCP's vicious human rights abuses and other crimes for so many years? I hope now you have a better understanding. So what is the rising New World Order I mentioned before? I think the biggest thing in the world now is that righteous people and righteous nations are standing up against, defeating and eliminating the CCP from this world and forming a new world order without the CCP. At the end of his speech, President Trump said this:
I am supremely confident that next year, when we gather in person, we will be in the midst of one of the greatest years in our history and, frankly, hopefully, in the history of the world.
I sincerely hope that if we do celebrate next year, we will be celebrating a world without the CCP. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Someone told me that he couldn't subscribe to my channel or like my videos. Unfortunately, it seems that the CCP's power and infiltration does not only stop at the United Nations, it's almost everywhere now. So I do need your support to spread the message. Please make sure you subscribe to and share my channel and check out my other videos. Thank you. See you next time.